Yeah. It's not going to get any better.
One at a time.
Yeah, that's.
Incidentally, the trains in when our kids did T-ball, there was no end to the games that didn't have a limit of any number of innings, and you had to just wait for sunset. So
But I think some of them do in their heads.
that was about 35, 40 years ago. Of that lead, you have a good chance to win. And they looked at me as if I had actually said something.
Looks like Lisa is joining.
Yes, I'm all set. Took me just a minute to get the connection working there, but I'm all set. How's everyone doing this evening?
Good.
Doing fine.
We can't see you though.
Let's see if I can get the video going here. Here we are. Wonderful. We had just a couple of little internet blips here in the library. I don't know if we've got some weather coming along or
I think
not.
I think we do.
Oh, okay.
I'm waiting for Betsy Whitman. Before I start the meeting here. We'll wait a
It's
couple
not-
more minutes, see if she
Yes.
connects.
It's not 5 yet. Oh, yes, it is, actually.
Yeah.
Dan, Betsy had to take her
Oh,
husband for an
that's right.
out-of-town appointment.
That's right.
And
She,
it might be a
thank you.
little bit late.
Thank you for reminding me, Anita. I guess we won't wait because she might be on the road right now,
Yeah.
coming back home from
Yeah.
Lewisburg, right?
Lewistown. Yeah.
Lewistown. Okay, before we start, let me ask everybody to mute themselves. Let's take these speakers one at a time. Thank you. And CNET's on board, so it's 5 o'clock. And I will call the meeting of the Patton Township Board of Supervisors to meeting here on April 28, 2021. So the first thing I'd like to do before we have public comments is that we had an incident in Patton Township yesterday that our Patton Police investigated. And so Chief Jolly, if you, turn the floor over to you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So yeah, we did receive, our officers were dispatched to a call that was received through the 911 center from a resident in Grays Woods neighborhood. This was on Monday, April 26th at about 9 a.m. that we received the call. The resident who was calling into the 911 center reported that there was a noose that was hanging from a tree in a wooded area to the rear of their residence. And it was placed there within the last 24 hours. And we should note also that this is a family of color that reported this incident to us. The initial investigation has revealed that the rope did come from a swing set, and it was thrown into a wooded area by a child in the neighborhood. We are still investigating this incident though. So we are still looking for any additional witnesses to anybody who might have actually seen this incident occur or any suspicious activity, particularly in the Grays Woods neighborhood between April 24th and 26th. So if anybody has any information they're willing to provide, we ask that they reach out to us. The non-emergency number for the 911 center is 1-800-479-0050, or you can call into our office here at 814-234-0273.
I was muted. Anita Tees, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Chief, for that. And with the sense that you're putting out a public call, in the sense that you're putting out a public call for citizens' help, I'm wondering if this might be an appropriate topic for an email blast, because not everyone watches our wonderful supervisors meetings, and not everyone may have read the article in the Center Daily Times. And an email blast would reach all of our residents with the request that you just made, that if there is any citizen who has further information, also it might be an opportunity to repeat the factual information, because I suspect there's been some misinformation and fear, and when rumors start, it's hard to stop them. And especially this incident falling so closely within the Martin Luther King framework of the defacement that happened there. And we'll be looking at the anti-hate statement shortly. But I'm just wondering if this would be an appropriate topic for an email blast.
Yeah, we can send that out first thing in the morning.
Good. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the Board of Supervisors? Seeing none, thank you very much, Chief Jolly. We'll move on to our regular agenda. First item is public comments. Citizens who have a wish to speak. I see your hand, Mr. Mullen. Let me see if there's anyone else, any other members of the public who wish to make a comment on something not on the agenda. Okay, see no hands. Mr. Mullen, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Mullen. I've been a Patton Township homeowner for 22 years. In the past 5 of 6 years, there has been a problem with the UAJA wastewater utility. I think they overbilled me by twice as much over everyone else. And I set up a website to describe and detail everything they did to me in the last 6 years, statecollegereport.com. And I asked to talk to your township lawyer, solicitor about this issue, because I think it's a Patton Township issue. I think the UAJA is overbilling me, and your township should care about a Patton Township homeowner getting, I think, overbilled. But your manager said, won't let me talk to your solicitor. So it's frustrating that, plus your zoning people won't talk to me about this. And I think your Patton Township has they did a conflict against me. It's not just the UAJA that I think is overbilling me. I think your township has a conflict with me for 5 of the last 6 years, because your rental inspectors said I had a single family home for 22 years. Your rental inspectors from COG never said I had an apartment in my house, but your UAJA members said I had an apartment in my house for 5 years, but they never inspected my house ever. So I think that's a conflict your township should deal with. You should join me with the lawsuit, or at least let me talk to your lawyer when I'm planning to sue the UAJA in about 4 or 5 months. So I have everything at my website, statecollegereport.com. Anyone can contact me with that through that website. Down at the bottom, there's a link. And I'm be glad to answer any of your board members' questions if you looked at my site, or do you agree with your appointed UAJA members that they should bill me twice as much as all of you? I mean, I can answer any questions. I've studied this issue for 6 years. I even set up a complicated website detailing exactly what they did to me for 6 years. So, I mean, I welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I will note for the public viewing this that Patton Township issued a statement in response to Mr. Mullen's allegations, and that statement is entered into the minutes of our last meeting 2 weeks ago. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we will now move to the next item, public hearings, library board update. Mr.
Item 2A, Dan.
I'm sorry.
We need to back up to item 2A, the.
Oh, 2A.
On diversity.
Sorry. Senior moment. I definitely did not intentionally jump over that. Statement 2A, statement on diversity, equity, inclusion. Who's going to start this? Doug, you want to
Yeah, just
give us a lead in?
last or Monday night at COG, the Center Region Council of Governments issued a joint statement that was approved by the 27 members that were at COG the other evening. Statement was issued in response to vandalism that occurred at the Martin Luther King Jr. Mural that's in downtown State College. In essence, the statement encourages municipalities of Center Region and the leadership of the Center Region COG to collaborate, support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to build a stronger Center Region. That statement was included in the agenda, along with some other information that came my way late last week regarding combating hate crimes, and a resource guide that was issued by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. I think it's 3 or 4 years old now, but that has several resources that people can use to reach out and report that. We are working locally, both at our local level. Chief Jolly is working on a companion piece that would go along with this. It was, how do you report that in Patton Township? And then the CCU group, which is Community and Campus and Unity, is working on a piece also that will apply to the larger area, the county-wide probably, that, no matter where you are in the county, if you think you've been you've been intimidated or abused by a hate crime or bias, or been a victim of bias based on ethnicity or race or any of those issues, that there will be guidance to help you where you can report those and follow up. So with that, I think the appropriate action for the board would be to take action to endorse the COG statement, and again, pledge support for our community efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So moved.
Okay, the suggested action has been moved by Elliot Abrams. Is there a second?
Second, and I have a
Second.
statement.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
My statement is also on the COD General Forum agenda was the topic titled Statement Condemning Hate Crimes in Our Community. It also included the statement of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make no mistake that this issue came out of the hate crime and vandalism of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mural. In the future, I would like the statement to reflect the reality that this is a hate crime and address it as so. COG recognized that hate, discrimination, and bias has no place in the Center Region community, and COG accurately identified the issue of acts of hate. One of the shared priorities that the Center Region is to be welcoming to everyone. That statement read, whereas the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives must go beyond rhetoric. Therefore, the leaders of the Center Region Council of Governments joined voices to stand together to denounce hate and bias in our community. They encouraged the municipalities of the Center Region and the leaders of the Center Region COG collaborate the diversity and equity inclusion efforts to build a stronger Center Region. My personal note, and I beg you to bear with me one more minute. At the Oscars on Sunday night, Tyler Perry asked everyone to refuse hate. His message resonated with me to say it loud and clear. Refuse hate because they are Black. Refuse hate because they are white. Refuse hate because they are Hispanic. Refuse hate because they're Asian. Refuse hate if they're LGBTQ. I refuse hate because someone thinks differently than I. Mr. Perry also asked us to stand in the middle. That's when healing happens. That's when conversation happens. And that's when change happens. I would like to go one further and say change happens when people stand together as one. So this is a call to action for all of us to continue to stand united against hate crimes anywhere, and especially in our community, with the message to all, don't wait, refuse hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I'm wondering if you were suggesting we incorporate or include in a board's statement. I'm looking at the joint statement from COG. The very first whereas says, Center Region COG recognizes that hate, discrimination, and bias have no place in our Center Region community. Would you endorse adding that?
Oh, yeah. And how we have it stated, how do we have it? It's more of diverse, equity, and inclusion. It is not. This is a hate crime, and we should put on the agenda, and our statement should read, denouncing hate crimes. So I just don't want us to sugarcoat it.
Understand.
and get behind it as diverse, equity, and inclusion. We should just call it what it is.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just trying to give Doug some guidance on how to word this as
thank you.
far as a motion. So maybe Anita can edit this, but let me suggest that the motion read
And put to include hate crimes.
Yeah.
And that would be perfect.
That's fine with us changing the motion to say that.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank
Well,
you. And thank you to my colleagues.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do here is have a cohesive statement that we're not dropping the pledge support for community efforts. I'm just trying to add before that, we recognize that hate, discrimination, bias have no place in the center region. So my suggestion is the Patton Township Board of Supervisors recognizes that hate, discrimination, and bias have no place in center region community. And we endorse the COG statement past Monday, whatever the date was, and pledge support for community efforts to support diversity, equity, inclusion. Anybody, Anita, you want to edit that? Go ahead.
If I could just suggest the opening, say, has no place in Patton Township. Get our township name up there in Patton Township and the rest of and the Center County or the Center region. This would be something too for the website. We'll need to talk about how to frame it. Calling for people not to hate, probably those who, are receptive to that message, already agree. And how does one build a more inclusive, caring community? But I think in the beginning, the Patton Township Board of Supervisors stands with Patton Township residents because the community is, I believe, very united and vocal in this support. Stands with Patton Township residents in saying Patton Township is no place for hate. And we join with the COG in supporting .
Okay. Any other editorial comments, suggestions? Elliot already accepted the amendment. Pam, I assume you accept the amended
Yes.
motion?
And
Any other comments? Any citizen comments? I see no hands being raised, so let's move to a vote. All in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimously carried. Thank
And
you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a follow-up comment. Since the COG resolution urges townships to do more than rhetoric and to move ahead with support efforts. And since our township manager has mentioned several organizations that are working on plans outside this region, I would like to suggest there is a Patton Township woman who I've not spoken with, but I've heard her speak, Sonia DeLuca Fernandez, who lives right in Patton Township. She is the Associate Vice Provost for Educational Equity at Penn State, where she does strategic planning for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I heard her address the Anti-Bias Coalition on a Zoom call. And I'd like to suggest that we invite her or other colleagues of hers that are involved in moving this discussion forward to speak to us as a Patton Township resident. What can we, as the governing body of supervisors, since part of our legislatively approved responsibilities is to be a steward for the welfare of the township. And often people think of welfare as having good streets and public safety, and indeed it is. But I think welfare can also reflect the whole atmosphere in the township and addressing matters which could lead to public safety issues emotionally and otherwise. So I'd like to suggest that we consider bringing in someone to speak to one of our board meetings, just as we had the representatives of the Asian Pacific American folk come in and speak of how the concerns of their community needed to be addressed. Well, I think moving forward as a sequel to this statement that we have just approved would be to have someone like Sonia or someone else come to actually address what should our next step be in continuing the discussion and keeping this on the front burner. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. I think the rest of the board probably agrees with you. I do remember that Sonia did, along with Sharima Young, did address the board a couple of months ago about
Yeah, it was called.
Yeah, so your thought, Anita, is more directed, what's a presentation more directed at some kind of action plans.
In terms of even if it's just communication, for instance, the Anti-Bias Coalition Zoom that I was a part of and Pam Robb was a part of and Betsy Whitman was a part of, but we're part of it informally just because of our personal interests, not on behalf of the township. But they had, they showed a video on research about anti-bias or implicit bias actions. They had a discussion of what can common citizens do if you see someone being harassed in one of our stores right here in the center region. They had that kind of discussion. So I don't know what actions are needed going forward, but I think those who are moving this discussion forward might have some good recommendations for us.
Okay. We'll leave that in Doug's hands to find a future meeting that she can attend and make a presentation to the board. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Elliot.
I'm just looking back here a bit, and it's just frustrating to have my 74th birthday coming up next month and realizing that when I was growing up in Philadelphia, so many of my friends and others were talking about these exact same things and how in some ways we've made tremendous progress and in other ways it seems like no progress, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I think Pam raised her hand, yes, and agreed with you. Any other comments about this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on. Presentations, public hearings, and first one is library board update. Mr. Casey McLean, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Evening, everyone. I'm Casey McLean, obviously a Patton Township resident and current president of the Board of Trustees for SCLO Library. Linda Trevino is also a board member with me. And our director, Lisa Reeves Collins, is here with us. So any follow-up questions, she will hopefully happily take the floor on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, you will address the group regarding the reopening plans. Is that accurate?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Casey.
Okay, so that'll help. So I'm going to do my part, some talking notes that Lisa provided, just to give a little update on how things have been going. Obviously, with the pandemic for 13 months or so now, things are not how they were in 2018-19. From my point of view, the library has actually been doing extremely well and helping out COG, we'll say not even Patton Township, but COG residents significantly. As the board president, I have received emails that Lisa or Kathy Alloway received thanking the employees for working so hard and diligently and trying to provide whatever services they have been able to. Because as you all are aware, a lot of people, especially families, are sort of stuck at home and don't have access to the normal lifestyle that we've been used to, and being able to provide books and an escape has been exceptionally helpful for people. So from my appreciation to SCLO, thank you very much. So in terms of Patton, As is typical, Patton had the third highest checkouts in COG, which is about normal behind the Borough and Ferguson. I don't know if there's a friendly rivalry with Ferguson, so let's try to bump up into slot number 2. At the end of March, checkouts were roughly 18% total. So again, in the third slot, but 18% of all checkouts were from Patton residents. So very impressive. In 2020, again, which most of the year was sort of shut down for pandemic and we'll say slower services from SCLO, there were still 1,472 items that were returned to the remote book drop at the Unibart on Buffalo Run Road, Carson Corners. So again, ultimately what that says is even in extreme times, the library was well used, well loved, and seemed to be a vital and important piece of our community and Center Region specifically. So that's a very good thing. I will read you a quote. "Thank you for keeping our family supplied with a constant stream of books. Bedtime wouldn't be the same otherwise, and we'd miss the special part." I did not write that, but I can say from my own family with my own 6-year-old who loves chapter books, and we reserve Magic Treehouse and the Dragon Mystery Series and Captain Underpants, whoever he is, but Captain Underpants, we love the library, we love books, and they make bedtime a lot easier being able to read. So from my family to SCLO, thank you all very much. Let's see, we've had excellent attendance. There were 2 winter author events with Gail Galligan and Karina Yan Glazer. And I believe there's going to be a virtual visit in May with Liuan Pham, if I pronounced that correctly, Lisa. So bottom line, there were still, while obviously remotely, there still were winter programs and very highly attended. At the very least, gave people things to do other than Zoom meetings for work. And there's going to be, if not already, a great partnership with Discovery Space for the Elementary Explorers programs. There are 2 of those. This summer, there's going to be a virtual farm visit, specifically learning about birds of prey with Shavers Creek. My wife, Lucy, works with Shavers Creek. She's not one of the bird people, but very near and dear to our heart, as well as there's going to be learning about bugs with Ryan the Bug Man, getting an up-and-close view of venomous and non-venomous reptiles with Forgotten Friend Reptile Sanctuary. So again, keeping programs alive. And again, Lisa's going to be updating everyone on the reopening process, but the library is still providing programs and they're very well attended. And that means Patton Township's getting their money's worth. Let's see, there were more than 100 attendees for virtual activities surrounding this year's book choice. Centre County Reads, the address book by Deidre Mask. And this was mostly a program for adults. And this culminated in a author visit, obviously virtual, that was on March 23rd. Let's see, the 2021 Centre County Read selection, the address book, was a finalist for the 2020 Kirkus Prize for nonfiction and one of the Time Magazine's 100 must-read books of 2020. Mask's book presents an engrossing examination of what our addresses reveal about identity, race, wealth, and power. Additionally, we, SCLO, is teaming up with the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau and local Historia to present Hidden Happy Valley. This series of short virtual tours focus on the lesser-known history behind some of our favorite spots across the region. Don't miss the premiere episode. Hang on, buddy. Don't miss the premiere episode of SCLO's YouTube channel on Saturday, June 26th. Grab your keys and head out for adventure and fun. So those are the talking points. Again, if anybody has any questions, myself and Linda are here. If it's okay, I'm going to check out in a second because I got that guy to take care of, as well as the baseball team. But Lisa has some exciting news about reopening and where SCLO is going. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Casey. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you about one of my most favorite things in the world, which is our shared public library. One of the things that we've done throughout the COVID pandemic is that we've constantly listened to our community and really tried to provide whatever it was that we thought and they thought that they would need and things that would help. One of the things I did want to just mention, because I noticed that you're currently have a survey about internet services, is that we just started a few weeks ago with support from the Center Foundation to circulate hotspots. So individuals can go in and they can place a reserve on an internet hotspot that they can then bring into their home or work and make sure that they have internet connectivity. So we're getting a great response from that. We only have 12 that are circulating right now, but it's definitely with the response that we're getting an area that we're hoping to grow, and also just kind of an area I think that we forget sometimes that not everybody, certainly in our community, has access to the internet to enjoy all the services. I also wanted to share with all of you, we got some brand new information just a few minutes ago, which is our sort of annual overdrive circulation statistics by municipality, which we have a little bit more of a difficult time getting all the time. But in Patton Township in 2020, we actually circulated 17,529 items to Patton Township residents, which is just phenomenal. I think we were able to pivot really quickly, invest in our electronic resources, and hopefully just make everybody's lives a little bit better during the pandemic. Speaking of our commitment to always listening to our community and always choosing safety, we did do a survey just a few weeks ago, really kind of asking our community, what do you want from us next? Are you ready to come into the library building? How do you feel about building services, and what do we need to do in order to make this a safe environment for you? That survey was really well received. We had a tremendous response from the individuals who were at our doorside services in particular, and they said, we are ready to come into the building. So I'm in week 4 of my new position, but I can say that we are going to be entering our next phase of our COVID-19 reopening plan. Our plan is to reopen for lobby service on May 4th. Again, looking at what the community wants and making safety our priority. And then our goal is to ensure at the beginning of June, just in time for our summer reading program, and again, to be there for our communities, to be able to allow browsing throughout the building. And so we're working hard to get the infrastructure in place to make that happen beginning in June. One of the things that's going to be exciting is our summer reading program. It's Tales and Tales, and the first Tales is spelled T-A-I-L-S, and the second word is Tales, T-A-L-E-S. So we're enormously excited to be offering the summer reading program in the building and bringing people in for that browsing experience, which we know that they have missed so much. And honestly, the staff here at SCLO are just beyond excited to have the opportunity to interact with our community, serve the people at our service desks, and hopefully help people navigate the wealth of resources that's available to them. Any questions that anyone has about any of that, sort of those pieces of the reopening plan, or questions for me, or information that maybe in the future you'd like more of in regards to the library that I can ensure that I can bring back to you?
Looks like Pam Robb has her hand raised. Go ahead, Pam.
I just want to thank Lisa. She came in, hit the road, and is running. So we welcome you at Patton, because you have done an extraordinary job. Also to Miss Linda, thank you, because I know you've been at our other meetings, and it's just been wonderful the way, the programs are going and the avenue that you have taken to keep our residents safe. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I will absolutely
I'll
bring that
second
back
that.
and I will absolutely bring that back to the SCLO staff. The feedback that we get from the community is what really has kept us going and kept us trying to innovate and trying just to, keep on offering more during this difficult time. So that will mean so much to the staff. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Anita Tees, go ahead.
I want to commend you for this wonderful brochure that, well, brochures to newsletter. The design, the information, I don't know if everyone has received it in the community, but I learned you had programs I didn't realize you had. But this is just the programs are wonderful, the substance is wonderful, and the layouts, I mean, very intriguing. I mean, I think this would grab attention of people of all ages. And it raises a question in my mind. Now, our website is under construction, but the statistics you've mentioned about, you know, the 18% of all checkouts, the 17,529, you know, this is nice feedback to let our Patton Township residents know. And I know we're in the process of getting a communications person and redoing the website, but I'm wondering, do you ever do like little blasts to each township, things that they could simply, well, I know technology is never simple, but things that they could take and put on their website? Because I don't know if all of our Patton Township residents are aware of this, and I know they could visit your website, and they should, but for multiple media. So how can we support you in getting the word out to our Patton Township residents?
That is a wonderful idea, and something we really would like to see more of is sort of a cross-communication, cross-channel communication, because I think we also want to, on our end, bring your information to everyone as well. So our communications head is definitely, you know, very, very excited to do that, and we will be absolutely, you know, interested in just kind of furthering that relationship and really making that happen. I think that what we find is people receive their communication from so many different sources. You know, we want people to know everything that's available for them, and then let them navigate to that information in whatever way, you know, feels right for them. So we would love to do as much of that as we possibly can. So definitely very, very wonderful, exciting idea.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Whether you're on the board or not, public comments? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Judge McLean, Lisa Collins, and Linda Trevino for all the excellent work you're doing for our community.
And likewise, thank you, Patton Township, for the support of the library. We really appreciate it. And as you move forward with kind of looking at your internet service issues, we would love to be able to lend our expertise if it could ever be of any help. And then in communications as well, we will certainly be reaching out to see what we can do to help in that area as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. The next item agenda is 3B, public hearing for proposed rezoning of 101 Hallbaker Industrial Drive from I-1 to C1. So Doug, who's going to start the
I'll take this.
discussion?
I'll just give you a little introduction. We initially received this request in late January. Was referred to the Planning Commission, who looked at it over a couple of months. They did have some conversations about potential traffic that might be related to, or increases in traffic that would be related to a change in zoning. Our assistant engineer provided some information to quantify those impacts. The Planning Commission did review those in detail. The Planning Commission has made a recommendation to approve the request. That recommendation was a 5-2 vote. At this point, we're at the getting towards the latter parts of the process. Tonight, we will have a public hearing. We will ask for public comments, additional public comments on the requested rezoning. Let me just run through what we had in the agenda materials. There was a location map that showed where the property is at the intersection of Hallbaker Industrial Drive and North Atherton Street. Its current zoning is I1, and they've requested that it be rezoned to C1. There is C1 zoning on 2 of the other corners of that intersection, and the third corner of that intersection is zoned R2, which is our medium density residential, our park forest zoning. Also in the agenda, there were the request letter from Mr. Hendricks, some of that traffic data that I had noted that Alexandra had put together, and then copies of commercial and the commercial district regulations, including a list of all the permitted uses in commercial district, C1 district. There also was a full Patton Township zoning map that you could refer to. Finally, there were comments from other agencies that were required by law to reach out to and ask for comments. So we had comments from the Center Region Planning Agency and the Center County Office of Planning and Community Development. They were both positive towards the rezoning. Since we also have a joint industrial zoning agreement with College Township, Nicole Pollock, our planner, had reached out to them. They reviewed that on April 1st, and they too provided a positive recommendation. So at this point, if there are no further questions, we're ready to open the public hearing. Once that public hearing is open, we'll ask for public comments. After public comments have been provided, the board should close the hearing, and then the board has fulfilled their requirements under the municipality planning code and can take action as they deem appropriate. There was also included in the agenda item 3B.5, which is the draft of ordinance 2021-616, which would make that official change from the I1 district to the C1 district.
Okay, we will now open the public hearing for public comments on this proposed ordinance 2021-616 to rezone tax parcel as stated in the agenda from industrial C1 to commercial, general commercial C1. Do we have any members of the public here who wish to make comments on this proposed rezoning? If you do, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or turn on your video and wave your hand at me. Okay, seeing none, let me ask the manager, did you receive any communications from residents about this rezoning request?
No, we did send out notices to residents, I think within 1,500 feet of this property. We have received no comments.
Okay, I notice our 5th board member, Betsy Whitman, has rejoined us, so thank you, Betsy. Well, seeing no comments, further comments from the public, then I will close this public hearing, and the board will now consider action to be taken on this rezoning request. Board members, any questions or comments you wish to make? Raise your hand, or raise your hand on Zoom, or just wave at me visually. Okay, Betsy, go ahead.
Yeah, might I ask where we are in the agenda? Which item are we
Yeah,
talking?
we're on a 3B, public hearing for proposed rezoning of 101 Hallbaker Industrial Drive.
Thank you.
Board members, any comments or questions? Yes, Pam Robb, please go ahead.
I think since we didn't have any opposition, I think we should move forward. We have recommendations to approve this this issue. So can we just take a vote?
Yes, would you like to move to accept the request to rezone this parcel from I1 to C1?
So moved.
All right,
wait a minute.
seconded by Elliot Abrams. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Have to end the public hearing first.
Oh, I did. I said the public hearing was closed. If you missed that, I'll say once again, the public
It's
hearing
one of
was,
many things I've missed today, so that's fine.
oh, welcome to,
I do second the motion then.
welcome to my club, Elliot. It's growing larger every day. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, everybody raise their hand and said aye, so there's no nay votes. The motion passes. Now we'll move on agenda-wise to 3C, public hearing for proposed amendment to subdivision regulations requiring digital plan submission. Doug, you want to take this one?
Yeah, let me just give a quick introduction. Staff, Alexander and Nicole have been working on this, developed some recommendations to upgrade our submission procedures for land development subdivision plans. This primarily requires that applicants and their consultants provide us a digital copy in a PDF format in addition to the current paper submissions we get. I think the Planning Commission has recommended approval. And I think that's all I have. Again, because this is relates to a item under the municipalities planning code, the board is required to hold a public hearing on the change. And then once a public hearing is over, they may take action as they deem appropriate.
Okay. So I will open the public hearing on the proposed amendment to subdivision regulations requiring digital plan submission. So now we're open to any comments from the public. Anybody here online wish to address this particular item? Either use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or turn on your video and wave at me. Seeing none, this public hearing is now closed. So we will have board action to consider the proposed ordinance 2021-614. Any members of the board wish to speak, ask a question, or make a comment? All right, seeing none, I will then entertain a motion of some kind to either accept or deny this proposed ordinance. Betsy Whitman, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we accept this ordinance as described.
Is there a second? Anita Tees raised her hand. She seconded. Okay, any further discussion at all on this? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, all 5 members raised their hand and said aye, so the motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item is public safety, A, use of deadly force policy. You want to start this, Doug?
Yeah, I will start and then we'll turn it over to Chief Jolly here. This is part of the ongoing conversation we started last summer with regard to looking at specific policies that the township's police department follows. We've already worked through some issues related to procurement under federal surplus and execution of search warrants. Topic tonight is use of deadly force by police. Chief Jolly did provide proposal noting changes he recommends that we make to the police department's policies regarding use of deadly force and some of the related issues with that. And he is going to provide you a presentation along with a PowerPoint. And I'll ask Alex to put the PowerPoint up and turn it over to Chief Jolly.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. As Doug had just mentioned, I believe it's item 4A1 in the agenda. I did attach some documents The first one is our current use of force policy. The items in red are the suggestions that I'm making to you tonight to our current policy. I also added our first general order for use of force, since I'm suggesting in addition to that policy as well. I included our general order on the use of force to affect lawful objectives, because this also addresses deadly or potentially deadly force. And lastly, I included our new de-escalation policy. And that policy, actually a couple years ago, I did add language to our policy for in use of force for de-escalation. The Accreditation Commission put out some new standards. The wording that we had in our old policy satisfied those standards. However, we decided to make our de-escalation policy more robust. So we implemented the policy that you have before you there in February of this year. And item 4A2 is just a slide real quickly that just breaks down the recommendations that we will get to here briefly. I did want to just get into the recommendations. I have a slideshow here to present to you to give you a little bit of the background of our deadly force policy, of some of our training that we do, and some of the other things related to use of force in general here within the agency. So, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar, but Patton Township Police Department was created informally in 1961. The township passed a resolution in September of 1965, which officially established the Patton Township Police Department and appointed officers thereof. So that means we've been around in existence for the past 55 years. And in those 55 years, our officers have never used deadly force towards a person. And that's not to say that they certainly haven't had times where they would have been justified to use deadly force. And I just have real quickly a couple examples that I want to share with you that certainly the officers definitely were justified to use deadly force. One occurred back in the mid-90s. It was with an officer who still works for our agency, was handling a crash out on Buffalo Run Road. The crash was in front of a residence, and the property owner came out onto his porch while the officer was investigating the crash. The homeowner was intoxicated, and he had a shotgun in his hands. While the officer was on the scene, that individual fired his weapon in the direction of the officer. The officer took cover and did not return fire towards that individual, but was able to de-escalate that person and safely take that individual into custody. A little bit more recently here in 2013, our officers were assisting Ferguson Township Police Department on a domestic dispute incident. They arrived at the residence and went to the front door and knocked on the door to make contact with the parties who were involved. And the officers were met by a male who was holding a handgun and pointed that gun directly into the faces of the officers at that doorstep. Luckily, the officers were able to react very quickly and grab the gun, eventually wrestling it away from the individual and again, negating the need of deadly force. So just a couple of examples of the bravery, the resilience of our officers, and how well, again, they're able to de-escalate situations without the need to use deadly force, even when the deadly force clearly could be justified in the two examples I gave. And obviously we could provide many more examples, but I just wanted to share a couple quick ones from our history over the years here. So where does our justification for use of force in general come from? And this is out of our policy, section 131, General Order 131, which is the use of force to effect lawful objectives. But we get the justification to use force, and we're not talking specifically about deadly force, just using force in general. From the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, Chapter 18, Chapter 5, which is the general principles of justification. And that describes those circumstances in which use of force is justified. These provisions and the related case law, including federal case law, made binding on Pennsylvania through the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, shall establish the only legally binding restrictions regarding the use of force by the Patton Township Police Department personnel as it relates to criminal or enforceable civil matters. And just as a reminder, as far as the amendments go, the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution guaranteed all citizens equal protection of the laws. And next slide. Now, specifically for deadly force, and we've discussed this, I talked about it a little bit last meeting when we were giving you the introduction to this. The justification, again, specifically for deadly force comes from Section 508, subsection A of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. And that provides for the provisions for the lawful and justified use of deadly force by a peace officer. And again, our policy does include language that's somewhat directly or very similar to how the law is written. So Pennsylvania state law, I did read this to you verbatim during our introductory meeting, so I won't necessarily go through the whole paragraph here. However, if you look about 5 lines down in that first paragraph, it starts to talk about when specifically, again, deadly force is justified. So it says, however, he is justified in using deadly force only when he believes that such force is necessary to prevent the death or serious bodily injury to himself or such other person, or when he believes both that such force is necessary to prevent the arrest from being defeated by resistance or escape, and the person to be arrested has committed or attempted a forcible felony, or is attempting to escape and possesses a deadly weapon, or otherwise indicates that he will endanger human life, inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. So the next slide is our current policy, and again, it is very similar to what we see in the state law. But since this is the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about here, I will read this to you. This is directly out of our policy. It says the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, Title 18, Chapter 5, Section 508, subsection A, relating to the use of force in law enforcement, provides for the lawful and justified use of deadly force by a police officer only when he or she believes that the action is in defense of human life, including the officer's own life, or in defense of any person in immediate danger of serious physical injury, or when he or she reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent the arrest from being defeated by a resistance or escape, and the person to be arrested has committed or attempted a forcible felony, or is attempting to escape and possesses a deadly weapon, or otherwise indicates that he or she will endanger human life or inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. And again, that language comes mainly from Section 508, Chapter 5, Title 18 of the Crimes Code, directly out of the law, the state law in Pennsylvania. The one thing I want to clarify, though, because you've heard forcible felony now twice, by definition, that includes the crimes of murder, voluntary manslaughter, rape, robbery, kidnapping, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, arson, endangering persons, and also aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. Now, we have talked a couple times about landmark case law that has come from the United States Supreme Court. One of the biggest ones related to deadly force is Tennessee versus Garner. It was a 1985 ruling. And in this civil case, the Supreme Court of the United States held that under the Fourth Amendment, when a law enforcement officer is pursuing a fleeing suspect, or we have that fleeing felon, the officer may not use deadly force to prevent escape unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. So it was found that the use of deadly force to prevent escape is an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment in the absence of probable cause that the fleeing suspect posed a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. So it's important to remember a couple of slides ago, when we were talking about our use of force justification in our policy, we said these provisions in the related case law, including federal case law, made binding on Pennsylvania through the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, shall establish the only legally binding restrictions regarding the use of force by the Patton Township Police Department personnel as it relates to criminal or enforceable civil matters. So again, we follow the case law because it is, again, including the federal case law. Obviously, we're talking about federal case law when we're talking about a Supreme Court decision. So our officers are trained on Tennessee versus Garner yearly, and we abide by that ruling from the United States Supreme Court. So, we question, is the current law constitutional? In 2019, Lindsey Vaughn, who's the executive director of the Pennsylvania District Attorney's Office, District Attorneys Association, said that Pennsylvania's use of force laws strike the necessary and appropriate balance between the constitutional rights of every person and the very real need of law enforcement to protect the community as well as themselves and their fellow officers when in the line of duty. Next slide. Okay, so this is, again, right out of our policy in our Code of Ethics section. And this comes to us from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or the IACP. It states that all law enforcement officers must be fully aware of the ethical responsibilities of their position and must strive constantly to live up to the highest possible standard of professional policing. The IACP believes it is important that police officers have clear advice and counsel available to assist them in performing their duties consistent with these standards, and has adopted the following ethical mandates as guidelines to meet these ends. And then they address specifically use of force, and talk about a police officer will never employ unnecessary force or violence and will use only such force in the discharge of duty as is reasonable in circumstances. Force should be used only with the greatest restraint and only after discussion, negotiation, and persuasion have been found to be inappropriate or ineffective. While the use of force is occasionally unavoidable, every police officer will refrain from applying the unnecessary infliction of pain or suffering and will never engage in cruel, degrading, or inhumane treatment of any person. So obviously that applies to any type of force, but again, straight out of our policy. So we talk about what other options do we have available. So again, in our use of force policy, it already states that use of force escalates only when each lower level of force has been examined or discarded as impractical in the current circumstance, or which has been tried and failed in the situation at hand. We also took some sections out of our de-escalation policy. I've mentioned it before, I truly believe police officers are expert de-escalators. And it's not because we've sent them to training for de-escalation, which we do. We like to try to continue to teach them any new tactics or give them any new tools for their tool belt. However, it's the day-to-day, that when they're out on the street, they are constantly dealing with conflict. I've said before, people don't call the police department to just say that they're having a fantastic day and there's no problems. Generally, we get a call because there's some type of conflict and generally involves multiple parties. So our officers, almost on every single call that they respond to, they are de-escalating individuals in the situation to again, come up to a compromise or a solution to whatever issue that's acceptable by all parties. So I just wanted to point that out about our de-escalation with our officers. All right, next slide, please. So we talk about verbal warning. Our policy already does require officers to give a verbal warning if practical. So it says where practical, the officer shall identify himself or herself as a law enforcement officer and a verbal warning giving of his or her intent to use deadly force. Again, that is straight out of our deadly force policy. Our officers do receive training on this practice at the live firearms training and also during our use of force scenario training as well. Next slide. We also talk about when a person is only a threat to themselves. So deadly force can only be used to prevent suicide or the commission of a crime under Pennsylvania law if an officer thinks there's a substantial risk a suspect will harm or kill someone. And the use of force does not put the third party at risk. And this is already outlined in the same Crimes Code section 508, subsection D of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. We do train our officers on this exact scenario where an individual is only a harm to themselves. And you have to be careful about saying somebody's only a harm to themselves. If they have a firearm and they're pointing it at themselves, they can just as easily extend their arm and point it towards somebody else, putting somebody else in danger, or right at the law enforcement officers themselves. So you have to be careful when we talk about they're only a threat to themselves. Certainly they can be, depending on what the weapon is and where the officers are at. In one of the scenarios that we train our officers, it truly is almost a barricaded person where we tell them that there's nobody else inside, that the person does have a weapon, and they're making comments about harming themselves. And we say go. And a lot of times the correct response is to stop at the threshold of the door, to not go in, and to attempt to make contact in some other fashion, unless there's some reason that they truly need to get in to stop that individual from harming themselves. But engaging the individual from outside the room would be something, and of course that goes back to our de-escalation. And along the same lines of de-escalation, our policy also provides for other options for our officers to assist in de-escalation in a situation, such as calling for more resources, utilizing available barriers, like we were just talking about, staying away from the individual if they're only a harm to themselves, between the non-compliant person and the subject and the officer, containing or limiting the movement of the subject, reducing the officer's threat of danger or exposure by moving to a safer position. Again, it might be staying out in the hallway or whatever the case may be. And then short-term disengagement or possibly complete disengagement if that's what is determined to be appropriate. All right, next slide. All right, so talking about behaviors of individuals and the decisions that they may make, sometimes, a lot of times we can't obviously control somebody's behavior or decision they're going to make. So I have a quick video, and Alex, if you want to stop this right about the 50-second mark, is a good time just to turn it off then.
Camera video shows the moment a Lancaster City police officer shot and killed a man. That's right. So that officer was then called to a house yesterday afternoon to investigate a fight between the man and his mom. And we want to warn you that the video you're about to see, you might find it disturbing. We are freezing the video right before the man was actually shot.
Where'd they go? Get back, get back.
All right, you could hear those gunshots being fired against. We paused the video right before 27-year-old Ricardo Munoz was shot. He died at the scene.
Stop it there, Alex. That's
video,
good.
you can see what police.
So obviously that's nearby. That happened in September of 2020 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it just goes to show it's nearly impossible or is impossible for us to craft the perfect policy that will direct our officers exactly how to handle every single situation that they encounter. We deal with people, so we can't predict what a person is going to do or to say, their behavior, the decisions that they're going to make. And sometimes we don't even get an opportunity to speak with an individual. The audio wasn't the best on that. The officer never even had an opportunity to engage with that individual. He literally came out of his house with a knife and started running after the officer and attacking the officer. So, a situation where the officers were showing up, just trying to, an officer showed up to just try to get this individual some mental health assistance, and then unfortunately ended up in a deadly force encounter. This next video is real quick. This is from one of our cases. And just to give you a little bit of background, because it picks up a little bit later on into the call. So our officers were dispatched to a residence. The caller was concerned for her boyfriend's mental health condition. The officers spoke for the male for about 30 minutes, attempting to talk him into going voluntarily to the hospital for treatment. But he refused all the services, and there was nothing that he did or said that the officers were going to be able to petition for a 302. The officers suggested to the female that she speak with the delegate service, and a short time later, after she spoke with them, a 302 was issued. So the officers arrived back on scene, and this is where the video is going to be picking up here, told the male that he had to go to the hospital as a 302 warrant had been issued. And the caseworker, you'll see, come to the door. Everything is redacted out, but you'll see that she came to say that, yes, she does have the paperwork that the male was concerned about. But try to listen carefully to what the male says. the officers here. Go ahead, Alex.
So let go. She has the why does she have the one when you don't officer? The woman in crisis works. She's getting it right now. No, why does she have the one? Let me get him out right now. You gonna shoot me? No. You gonna shoot me? No, I'm not gonna do it. Fight this shit out and let me stop doing this dumbass. Fuck out my house. No. You have a warrant. So we have to have the warrant. You have to pay for it? If I say
All right, Alex, you can start. It looks like we lost the audio. All right, so, in that instance there, again, the officers had arrived, again, tried to calmly talk the individual into going to the hospital, but yet explaining to him that a 302 warrant did exist and that he had to go to the hospital for treatment. And he made a decision that he was going to fight with and assault two police officers. It's tough to tell from that video angle, but he did end up punching both police officers. And quite frankly, had he been cooperative with the officers, he might not have even been handcuffed. If he would have said he was going to go to the hospital voluntarily, or at least saying, I don't agree with this, but I'll go, and I understand that I have to go. But the officers didn't want to wrestle with him. They wanted to transport him to the hospital so he could receive treatment for any mental health issues he was experiencing. But as soon as he decided to fight, obviously the chances of an officer or of him getting injured increased dramatically. Unfortunately, you couldn't really see at the end there, but our officers did a fantastic job with this. At the very end, the officer actually calmly is on the radio asking for additional officers to come to the scene. And then they literally kept this man pinned down on his back for about 2 minutes as they waited for additional units to come. And when they did, and they had enough officers to safely get him into custody, they did so. So there was very minor injury to the officers from his assault, but there was no injury to him by the officers making the right call, keeping him pinned down, keeping him calm, and then getting extra assistance there to get him into custody safely. So some of the training that we receive, our officers are trained to use the best judgment because it is going to be their decision making as well. But they're trained to use their best judgment to resolve any given situation, and to do so with the safety of the public, the officers, and the suspect as their foremost objectives. And we always train with an emphasis on safety, again, for everyone involved, and de-escalation. We would much rather talk to someone and have a conversation and not have to have any type of weapon out. God forbid it be deadly force, but even a taser or pepper spray. We obviously do not want to use force if we do not have to, because again, as soon as anything starts to escalate, the chances of our officers being injured or them injuring somebody that they really don't want to have to injure increase dramatically. So we do use live scenario training with airsoft weapons, but the focus on that is really to achieve compliance when the officer de-escalates the subject properly. So a lot of times, I think, some police agencies, or you see law enforcement training, and every time, you put on this equipment, you put on protective gear, and you think that you have to get into a shooting scenario every single time. We try to stress, that doesn't happen in our normal day-to-day jobs. So we try to stress, speaking to the person, talking to them, and getting them to do what you want them to do, and doing it safely. Not that, anticipating that there's going to be a shooting in every scenario that they go through. We frequently review real recordings of law enforcement use of force, since a lot of police agencies across the country now have body-worn cameras. There's millions of videos out there. But we like to look at those and to be able to discuss. Unfortunately, we always say you don't want a Monday morning quarterback anybody, but that's kind of what we do. We look at videos and say, you know what, hey, this worked really well. It's something we should think about incorporating into our use of force and our defensive tactics training. or we see things that we say, you know what, that doesn't work well. We're not gonna use that. But our officers do complete annual written tests covering topics related to our use of force standards. And then specifically for firearms, the Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission, or MOPEC, provides a specific firearms qualification course that we must do at least one time per year and pass with a score of 75%. And that's for any firearm that the officer utilizes during the course of their duties. Obviously, it's very important for officers to stay proficient with the weapons that we carry. Believe it or not, firearms and shooting is a perishable skill. So we try to let our officers get as much practice as we can afford. But failure to meet the standards from the commission will end up and result in disqualifying that officer from using that weapon, which could have implications with them being able to work the street effectively. Next slide. All officers are authorized to carry weapons, shall receive in service every year. And this covers our use of force and deadly force policies. When we talk about our use of force, again, that's there's 14 general orders in our use of force policy. One of the general orders is specific to deadly force, but we cover all of the use of force general orders. But we do, again, talk about federal case law such as Graham v. Connor that does have a bearing on how we perform our duties. All officers shall demonstrate satisfactory skill, proficiency, and qualifications with all approved lethal weapons that they are authorized to carry. And we do have 2 certified instructors, firearms instructors that run us through those qualifications at least once a year. But like I said, we try to get our officers as much practice as possible because it is a perishable skill. So we try to get our officers out about 6 to 8 times per year. We go through, again, our qualifications. We have to do a reduced light qualifications. Studies have found that a lot of shootings, or majority of shootings, occur in times of the day when there's less light available, when the sun's down. Less lethal beanbag shotgun training qualification, and a lot of other skills that we practice. So that's just a real quick recap of our training that we have specific to use of force and to deadly force. And now that brings me to our recommendations. So I believe that we should leave the language from the state law as the state law. If there's going to be a change made to the state law, I believe that needs to come from the legislature. So specifically in section 508 related to deadly force, I think we should leave that the same. I do believe that we should include a little bit of a stronger sanctity of life statement in section 130, which is, again, our first general order and use of force. What I'm proposing here is the Patton Township Police Department recognizes and respects the value of all human life and dignity without prejudice to anyone. Police officers have been delegated the awesome responsibility to protect life and property and apprehend criminal offenders. The apprehension of criminal offenders and protection of property must always be subservient to the protection of life. The officer's responsibility for protecting life must include their own. Now, specifically to deadly force, and again, in our deadly force general order, I think that we should include a line, a section that says, when officers determine that the subject is no longer a threat, the use of deadly force is no longer justified. Next slide. 2 more recommendations that I have. Again, in our deadly force policy, we need to add a new section that speaks directly to rendering aid after a deadly force encounter. This is something that I think we have always trained and reinforced to our officers, but it was not directly part of our deadly force policy. So when officers determine that the subject is no longer a threat, immediate medical assistance shall be provided to the subject. Emergency medical services shall be summoned without delay to provide more advanced care and transport to a medical facility. And then lastly, I think that, again, as a kind of an opening statement for our deadly force policy, to include a line that says Patton Township police officers shall endeavor to exhaust all other reasonable means of apprehension and control before resorting to the use of deadly force. Officers shall not unnecessarily or unreasonably endanger themselves or others while applying this policy to actual situations. So that concludes my recommendations. Again, those are in an attachment to the agenda. I truly believe that we need to make sure that we keep our policy clear and concise. One of the things that when we went through our accreditation reassessment, the assessors were really impressed by how direct and easy to read and easy to follow our policies were. They actually made comment about that in our Exeter interview. They thought that the policies were all well written, but they need to remain clear and concise, and in my opinion, in line with our state law. Again, just so that we're not setting a standard for confusion for our officers when we have policy that's different from what the law in the state of Pennsylvania says. So I appreciate your time, and that completes my presentation.
You're muted, Dan.
Thank you. All right. I see Dr. Ben Jones is with us. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Dr. Jones?
I do. Thank you, Supervisor Trevino and the board for the opportunity. I appreciated the presentation by the chief. It was very detailed. And the two recommendations he made in terms of language to add about prioritizing the protection of life and also emphasizing that officers should avoid actions that unnecessarily precipitate dangerous encounters. I fully support that and was pleased to see that. I will make the case, though, that I do think the board should go further, and specifically on this issue of the Pennsylvania state law and having that in the policy. One thing that the chief said that I agree with is that the policy needs to be clear, concise, and easy to understand. And if we look at the Pennsylvania state law, that last section, the person to be arrested has committed or attempted a forcible felony or is attempting to escape and possesses a deadly weapon or otherwise indicates that she will endanger human life or inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. That is not the clearest and concisest thing written in the English language. I think we can agree to that. And so I would favor both a change to the language that's easier to understand, which I tried to lay out in the recommendations I sent. But I also think the substantive question in terms of what deadly force is permitted is key and is essential. And so one thing I want to, in terms of making the case for that, I want to start with the bill that was proposed by the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, House Bill 1664. And so when I put together my proposed policy, it drew on that significantly. And so the key thing that bill says is that deadly force by police is only justified if they reasonably believe that it's necessary to stop an imminent threat of death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape. And so it limits the justification of deadly force to those imminent threats. Whereas our current policy and the current state law says that if someone's attempting to escape, but they're not an imminent threat, police could still use deadly force. So there's the example that has been brought up a number of times. Someone goes into the sheets, robs the sheets, running away. Only way to stop them from getting away is deadly force. According to Pennsylvania state law, according to current deadly force policy here in Patton Township, and according to the revisions that have been proposed, police would be justified in using deadly force in that situation, even if they do not pose an imminent threat to someone else, to the officer or to others. And I think that is a fundamental flaw with both Pennsylvania state law and with the current policy. And when you look at what was the impetus for this proposal by the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, it was the Antoine Rose shooting in East Pittsburgh in 2018. And so just to review in terms of what happened in this particular case, Antoine Rose, a young Black teenager, was in a car. The car was involved in a drive-by shooting. Rose was not the shooter, but he was in the car that where someone else shot at someone in a drive-by shooting. They pulled over the car. Rose ran out of the car, and as he was running, as he was fleeing, he was shot and killed by Officer Michael Rosfeld. He was unarmed, and that case, it went to trial, but the officer was found not guilty in no small part because of Pennsylvania's law, which, under that set of circumstances, deadly force would be justified. Now, that incident, I'm not going to show the video of that because I know that could be, troubling for folks, but that incident is available. You can go look at it. And I think what we need to ask ourselves as a township, would we be comfortable with one of our officers using deadly force in that same set of circumstances? And if we're not, then it's essential that police policy and police training make very clear not to use deadly force in those circumstances. And, why should we do that? Well, obviously, I think the main reason is to prioritize protection of life. It was not necessary to shoot Antoine Rose in that situation, and it was unnecessary. But I think another thing to think about as a township is the risk of civil liability that we could face. So in that particular case, the officer was found not guilty. He wasn't, he didn't go to jail, he wasn't convicted. But East Pittsburgh, which is a small municipality, much like us, it ended up paying out $2 million to the family in a settlement after that case. And so and part of the suit, it alleged that the officers there in East Pittsburgh were improperly trained. And so do we want to have in place a policy that would justify deadly force in those exact same circumstances? And I know for me, I don't. And I think there's strong reasons why we should change it and close that loophole. Now, another thing to emphasize is, when I bring proposals to the board, I'm not going to bring proposals that you don't have the authority to do. And so there's federal law, there's state law, and the way to think about it is, state law provides these circumstances where police can use deadly force, where they're justified in using deadly force. But what you can do as a municipality and say, you know what, we actually think that's actually a little too broad, and that the circumstances in which we think our police should be justified using deadly force should be narrower. And you have the authority to do that, because what federal and state law do is they set a floor that everyone has to follow, but you can go beyond that. And I think you can go beyond that and putting in place a policy that's more in line with protecting life, and is also a heck of a lot clearer than Pennsylvania state law, which you have to sit and look at and look where all the ors are and all the disjunctions, and it's a mess. So I think so I would make the case for that. Not every police department in the state of Pennsylvania has Pennsylvania state law in their use of force policy. You can look at Philadelphia. They don't even mention, they don't have that in their deadly force policy and their use of force policy. So it's something that you have the power to do. And I think it's critical to do, given the importance of having policy and training in place that prioritizes protection of life. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm obviously, willing to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you, Chief Jolly. Yes, I agree that your report was extremely detailed and informative. Okay, so now we have questions. Elliot had his hand raised first, so Elliot, go ahead.
Well, Dr. Jones, the thing I wonder about is, let's say we did what you said. Is there any downside to doing that? Because I can see a confusion downside that can be hazardous if people are unsure what to do and then make a mistake. But what other downsides might there be that people talk about in your profession?
So when you look at deadly force policies, usually there are two different scenarios in which police can use deadly force. So one is there an imminent threat to either the officer or someone else? And that could threat of life, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, etc. And I think most agree, like, in those situations, it's necessary, deadly force is justified, it's necessary to protect life, either the officer's life or someone else. Where there's been, what we've been debating and where there's a lot of debate is, well, what if someone does something in the past, it could be in the very near past, they commit a robbery, they commit some other crime, drive-by shooting, I mean, that's a serious crime, right? That happens in the past, and then they're trying to escape, but they're not in imminent danger. And so the argument made for, well, why should officers be able to use deadly force in that instance is, well, they may go off and hurt someone else. And so I think that would be the argument that's made for why to give police the power in those sorts of instances. The problem is, like, we don't really have good data on, like, is this helping save life or not? And, I think, using deadly force is the greatest power that government can use. And so you need to have sort of a high justificatory burden to meet. And so if we don't have sort of clear evidence that this is actually helping and, making us safer, I think we should be wary of that. And then another thing to remember too is that when the police kill someone, that in many ways, especially if it's questionable, if it's a questionable shooting, if it's unjustified, that has a bigger impact in the community than another murder. All murders are bad. We don't want another killing. We don't want anyone to be killed, whether it's the police or a civilian. But it undermines government legitimacy when police kill someone under questionable circumstances. And I think when we look at, like, a case like the Antoine Rose shooting, would we be comfortable with police using deadly force in that sort of instance? And I think, given the sort of repercussions that would have, that we would expect in our community, I think it's very clear what those would be in terms of the benefits of giving police the power to use deadly force in these scenarios. It's far murkier and less clear in terms of what benefits that would provide. But I will be very straightforward with you. This is something that there's not great data on.
One piece of data is that I always ask myself when I see one of these things, did what that person do deserve that? Would they get the death penalty for it? And if the answer is clearly no, then to me that says you shouldn't be looking to kill somebody.
And one thing to point out is that's not the standard in Pennsylvania state law, because it's a forcible felony, which is a much broader category than murdering someone.
Okay, Chief Jolly, Sultan, I see your hand, but let me ask Chief Jolly to respond to that issue. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. So just to also point out, in the House bill in Dr. Jones's proposal, it says deadly force is justified only when an officer reasonably believes that such force is necessary to protect the officer or another person from imminent death, serious bodily injury, and then just kidnapping or sexual intercourse compelled by force or threat. And I just wanted to point out that language is actually taken verbatim from Title 18, Section 505 of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. And that statute actually addresses when use of deadly force is afforded to private citizens for self-protection. So I'd argue that due to the nature of police work, it would be irresponsible for us to hold police to the same justification standards that apply to a private citizen authorized use of force application. So I just wanted to point that out, that that language does come from Section 505 in the Crimes Code.
Okay, let's move to Sultan Magruder. You have the floor. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. Dr. Jones was about to respond to that. Could I push that back to him?
I just had one quick thing. One thing that I've noticed, especially after some, high profile deadly force incidents, is that sometimes, I think there are important distinctions to make between civilians and police. Like, in some states, civilians will have a duty to retreat, if that's a way to avoid a deadly encounter, whereas obviously police wouldn't have that same obligation to retreat. This depends on if the state has a stand your ground law, but obviously we wouldn't want to put that same obligation on police, because police sort of have to run to where the trouble is and to take care of it. But I think one of, that the anger that a lot of times we see is that this different standards and sometimes overly permissive standards apply to police and it doesn't apply to civilians. And this sense of there being a double standard where if you were to use deadly force in this incident, like, you would be convicted and there'd be consequences, where these really broad circumstances where police seem to get off the hook. And I think that's a legitimate concern that you find in the community. And I think that's important to address.
Okay, Mr. Magruder, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the time. And so I'm by no way an expert or really knowledgeable about any of this stuff. So I'm appreciative that, one, this is on the docket and of discussion. Chief Jolly, I appreciate you providing, some context as well as the history that there hasn't been, a deadly use of force here in Patton Township, and I hope that stays the same. And Dr. Jones, clearly, I guess you've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes to provide information about this. So I have a lot of thoughts, but again, coming from a novice perspective, I guess what I will say is I agree, Dr. Jones, from a layperson's view, the Pennsylvania code seems convoluted to me and unclear. And maybe this is a question, Chief Jolly, you could clarify for me, or make sure I'm accurate in this. But what it seemed like was that there's a case in which a person who commits a felony burglary, for example, if they commit the felony burglary and then they sort of like run to escape, that would justify a deadly use of force. And I'm thinking like a felony burglary, that could just be like robbing a store like with a bat or something like that, or not even with like a gun. So am I clear on that that's a situation where you could use deadly force?
Yeah, so again, the federal statutes would kick in there as well. So Tennessee versus Garner, again, told us that the ruling from that and what the Supreme Court held was that you cannot shoot at a fleeing felon unless they are a danger to someone, and we can justify the fact that they are going to be a danger to someone. So that again, that's something that we train annually, and we our officers actually physically have written tests on it, but we discuss that case and that case law every year, because there's not an officer in my agency in that situation that would shoot that person. It's incumbent upon us to do our good police work then to figure out who it was that came in and robbed the store or burglarized the residence, whatever the case may be. That is not our job, or do we have the ability to use deadly force on that individual?
Okay, and thank you for that. So that's helpful. And so if however that's written, I guess that law, case law, Pennsylvania codes or whatever, I don't know, is written as such, I think more clarification or more clarity could be helpful there, so to not have any confusion. But also I was wondering, what does, in slide 10, there was a statement about when an officer determines subject is no longer a threat, rendering medical attention. And I was curious to know how is a threat defined? And I think I'm pulling from just recent stuff that has occurred with the George Floyd trial and arguments being made that there's potential for threat to happen even if a person is handcuffed. So I was just curious to know, how is a threat actually defined?
Yeah, so there is no further definition in what I had proposed that we add to it. So that's something that I guess we could debate. There definitely is subjectivity to that as well. Obviously the officers are going to be the one determining if an individual is a threat. Obviously if we have somebody in handcuffs and remove their weapon from that person, I would say at that point we consider them no longer a threat, and then we transition to again rendering aid if we had to employ deadly force to then attempt to help keep them viable alive until the EMS could arrive to give them advanced care. So there is definitely some subjectivity in that.
This was in my model policy, and it's taken from some other places. Sometimes an imminent threat is defined as someone with the present ability, opportunity, and apparent intent to immediately cause harm to an officer and another person. So basically, if you have the ability, the opportunity, and the intent together, then that would make you an imminent threat. If that's helpful at all.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think that this will just get to my last point, which will be after this. But the use of deadly. So if an officer were to use deadly force, what would be the procedure for like investigating? But specifically, would the officer be placed on like paid leave, administrative leave, or non-paid leave?
Yeah, so initially they would be placed on paid administrative leave while we began the investigation. In anything, and we wait for the investigation to tell us if if there was any kind of wrongdoing, we deal with it at that point. But the initial thing would be they'd be placed on paid administrative leave and pending the outcome of the investigation by an independent agency. Patton Township Police would not investigate a shooting that one of our officers was involved in. We would contact the Pennsylvania State Police to investigate that.
And if after the investigation they were found, that's where I'll be try to end here quickly. If they were found to be at fault, I don't know what the wording would be. Would they be required to pay back that money when they went on administrative pay leave?
So that's something we would deal with our solicitor and through the township. I couldn't answer that unless we encountered that.
If I can jump in.
Okay.
If there was a case like that, there's actually going to be probably 3 separate investigations that are going to go on concurrently. There's going to be a legal investigation based on the legal standards. And did that officer operate within the legal standards of what he can do? There's going to be a second one that's an employment investigation, looking at all the things that the officer did and did he follow all the training. There may also, and there probably will also be a third investigation that's based on civil law and civil rights. So those all 3 will be going on together. It's normal for any time to place any employee who's, unless there's, a clear preponderance of the evidence, they're going to go on paid leave. Probably at some point when you make a decision, an employment decision, that leave's either they're going to be terminated or maybe put on unpaid leave. And in Pennsylvania, because police officers have a right in their employment, they have an employment right. We follow under other there's other processes we have to follow to make sure that their due process for their employment activities are also covered. So, and those employment activities could eventually go to an arbitrator. So, but I would say I'm going to ask you, no, we're probably never trying to reclaim paid leave money from somebody. When we're going past that point of terminating somebody, it's probably we're just terminating and we're entering into a different stage of a discussion.
And I was asking, and that's helpful, thank you, Doug. Supervisor Erickson. I'm not sure how you're supposed to be.
I'm just the manager. I'm not. the
Manager, yes, Manager Erickson. And that question was because of Dr. Jones really speaking about optics, were this to actually happen and how the public would, react. I think it would probably be salt in the wounds if it felt like an officer seemed like it was unnecessary, and yet they're going on paid leave. So if there was a mechanism whereby, you're on administrative leave, holding your pay, and if it's found at the end that you were justified, then getting back pay or something like that. Anyway, that's just really for optics.
Yeah, I think you've seen that. I think you've seen in the last year a lot. The employment decision is usually made first, and I think that's a significant change that's happened in the last, I'm going to say, 5 years. It used to be a lot of times that the legal decision was made first, and then the employment. The Eric Gardner issue, I would say that, that played out before, until the legal decision was made. And then I think the employment issue, I'm not even sure it's completely settled yet, but it has drug on for several years after that. So, but I think you've seen, I think there's, and I watch these things, unfortunately, we all have to watch these things closely because they affect what we could do or might have to do someday. I think you'll see in a lot of cases where there's, and the violation may not be with the use of deadly force policy with the township or with the municipality. It may be with something else that, it probably is going to be something else. I'll tell you that's going to trigger a termination from somebody that they didn't follow some aspect of training that led to the unfortunate incident. So.
Okay. So thank you. And I would say, and some, just to wrap this back around, again, I would agree with Dr. Jones in that a little bit more specificity, clarity, and Chief Jolly, you mentioned this too, more specificity in the deadly force procedures. Just the wording would be helpful because it seemed very broad and convoluted and unclear. So.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify really well that our use of force policy goes way beyond what the state has. It's that which is a base, and then a whole bunch of other stuff that's included, including our training and everything. It's not just those 2 or 3 sentences out of state law. It's much, much more than that. So we'll work on clarifying that before we come back to the board.
Elliot, I see your hand, but I'd like to wrap this item up, and so we can move on. Elliot, yes, go ahead. You're muted, Elliot. We can't hear you.
I think what Doug just said just would be my suggestion, but however we vote on it or decide, we should probably collect and keep the discussion pros and cons of what we've just talked about, so that when and if the issue comes up again, we have more of a basis to go on, because rather than just like starting over from scratch.
Okay, Anita, go ahead.
Quick question, and maybe this is for our next discussion. I wanted to follow up on Dr. Magruder's point, and that also Dr. Jones, that looked at the question of the clarity of the Pennsylvania state law. And Chief Jolly, I know you don't write the state law, but my question would be, have police unions or associations tried to help the state clarify their law, since Dr. Magruder raised the point of the confusion of some of the language, and Dr. Jones seemed it's a little convoluted. I know that's not your problem, but my question would be whether there's been any discussion at the state police level of maybe urging legislators to help clarify a little more clarity in the law.
So I am not aware of any police agencies or unions in the state of Pennsylvania that have taken forward that argument or offered their assistance to the legislature. So I'm not aware of any.
Okay, at this point, we're not tasked with voting on anything because the schedule has been laid out for how we'll proceed. And the next time, the next issue on the schedule is May 3rd through May 14th, collect public input through social media and listening sessions. So Doug, I assume you're on track to be doing that data collection?
Yeah, we need to get those scheduled. I got dates from Dr. Jones and be working with Tyler Jolly. We'll get those listening sessions scheduled, and we'll start putting out notices on social media and through email to get as much input. Again, we'll probably do one early afternoon and one late afternoon, early evening, and we'll record those sessions and then make them available to the board as prior to the May 26th meeting.
Okay, good. Thank you. Clearly, this topic is of interest, vital interest to everybody here. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and call for a short recess. Let's do a 5-minute break here and then come back to resume this meeting. Thank you. I call the meeting back to order. And the next item on our agenda is number 5, Public Works. 5A is the Spring Road Report. Steve, I think this is yours.
Go ahead, Steve.
Can you hear me?
Now, yes, we can.
Oh. So yes, the road superintendent completed the road inspection in April of this year for 2021, which is he does in the spring of the year to essentially finalize, verify the fall road inspection report and finalize the 2021 or each year's road resurfacing program. And the report is included in your agenda packet. Essentially details all of the ratings for each road and a little breakdown summary of them by actual class, whether it's very good, fair, or poor. And the streets that you have in your agenda essentially mimic table 1, which is the tentative road resurfacing program for this year. It's fairly aggressive. Hopefully we can get some good prices, but certainly would like to have you approve that and for us to get started to do that.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve? Yes, Betsy, go ahead.
Yes, I actually have a question, I suppose maybe for Doug, and I apologize for not doing the research on this. Crandall Drive, where does that stand in the schedule?
That work will be done also this year.
Okay, thank you.
You looked under table 2, which is on page 3.
Oh, gosh.
It's its own standalone project that's outside of the overlay program.
Okay, on the attached material. Okay, and I missed that. I apologize. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Elliot, go ahead.
I move approval of what's being proposed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Pam Robb.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, let's move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Opposed? No one's opposed. Motion carries. So you're authorized to begin bidding for the recommended improvements. Moving on to the next item is a code amendment, exemption to community on-lot sewage disposal system requirements. Doug, do you start this?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think we looked at this maybe a month ago because of a decision the Department of Environmental Protection made regarding the proposed system for the Abington Equine Hospital. We need to make a small change to our code to exempt this sort of system from the Patton Township definition of community on-lot disposal system. So the draft agenda draft ordinance 2021-615 that was included with your agenda makes that exemption. This only applies to on-lot sewage disposal systems that serve 2 or 3 non-residential structures on the same parcel with a combined estimated sewage generation that is less than 2 equivalent dwelling units, EDUs. Those are the only types of systems that serve more than one building. This does not have any effect for systems that would serve multiple residential properties. So with that, I would ask the board consider action to approve this ordinance. Again, since this is not an issue that is covered under the municipality's planning code, we're not required to hold the formal public hearing, but we do need to do it in a public meeting as this. And we recommend that you also solicit information from the input from the public, should they have any.
Well, let's get a motion on board for discussion. Is there someone would move to adopt ordinance 2021-615?
So moved.
Elliot was first,
Second.
seconded by Betsy Witzman. Okay, let's have discussion now. Any members of the public here wish to address this proposed ordinance? I don't see any hands raised or. Okay, board members, any questions or discussion? Yes, Elliot, go ahead.
I'm in favor of doing this, but while I was thinking about this, that when they send out notices to people who have on-lot septic systems and the need for pumping them, they include in about the third paragraph a threat of legal action if you don't do it. And I think it's the only thing that we send to any of our residents on a first-time basis that threatens legal action before anybody even has a chance to respond to it. And I've noticed this for several years, and it's very annoying.
Yeah, Elliot, it's actually the COG code office that sends that letter out.
I know, I've talked to them and it's gotten nowhere, but I thought I'd bring it up again.
Any other reactions or comments from the board? Doug, I guess we have no standing, do we, in asking the code office to change
Let me talk to Walt Schneider and see what the possibilities are.
Yeah, well, I agree with Elliot, certainly nothing that comes out of the township office that I'm aware of threatens legal action. If
Not the first letter, yeah.
Not the first letter, exactly. I'm guessing that whoever wrote that text was maybe had experience with citizens ignoring
Could be
the letter, and then they added that text to try to get everyone's attention.
Most of the communications from code tend to be like that.
Okay, yeah, all right, we'll leave that in Doug's.
I'll still see if we may be able to just ask them to craft a separate letter for Patton Township. If we don't ask, they don't have an opportunity to say yes.
Any other questions or discussion? Let's move to a vote on adopting ordinance 2021-615. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to planning and zoning 6A, requesting a rezoning of 474 and 480 Douglas Drive. You want to refresh your memory, Doug, on this request?
Yeah, we originally received this request towards the end of February from Mr. Sam Hawbaker, who's a partner in the ownership group. The board had referred it to the Planning Commission with some direction to maybe look at a larger view of what might be potential. Township staff did identify a prior request that was made in 2006 that included these parcels plus 2 or 3 adjacent ones. That request in 2006 was denied by the Board of Supervisors. Planning Commission reviewed all that information in, I believe, April 5. The Planning Commission then took action and recommended making no change to the current zoning, but to keep it as it is as R2. The agenda materials also include a location map, the request letter from Mr. Hawbaker, that 2006 request. There's also some of the minutes from the board review of that back in 2006. And there was also several comments that had been provided over through outreach to the neighborhood prior to the Planning Commission review of it. I think there was one more that came in today that I did forward to the board members. Again, I think all the comments are universally against the rezoning. We do have the Mr. Hawbaker, Mr. Sam Hawbaker was with us. Are you still with us, Sam? There he is. And your opportunity to address the board, Sam.
Get myself unmuted first here. I hope the rest of your meeting doesn't go on for another 2 hours like it did to this point. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak once again. I'm a long-term resident of the community. I remember in the 50s when North Atherton Street was a 2-lane concrete highway. It has certainly grown by leaps and bounds since. Back in the 50s and 60s, there were some single-family residences on Atherton Street. But in 1975, if that serves me correct, when zoning was first implemented by the township, there was no development this far out on Atherton Street. We were involved in developing Park Forest Village that everyone seems to enjoy, but that original plan never included any highway frontage on North Atherton. So, the idea of keeping residents off that busy highway was purely intentional. In 1975, when the zoning was passed, the family did not have clear title to this lot. In fact, it took some action, legal action, to get that accomplished, which actually didn't occur until the late 80s. When a clear title was finally acquired, we came in with our very first request for change of zoning, which was denied even back at that time. I heard a lot of the residents that made comments saying about changing these residential lots was an encroachment into the residential area. If you look at the overall map, this section was never included in any of the residential development that had been planned. It was just per chance that the zoning had made it residential. And when we were denied back in 1990, a change of use and had the obligation to maintain that lot, we decided to put the 2 trailers on there that are there today as a temporary use. That was our intention originally. 30 years later, they're still there as a temporary use, and their useful life is running out. It's time to redevelop it into something more appropriate. To me, it has always been that the best use of that would be for commercial as an extension to the rest of the commercial district that ends at Douglas Drive. Clearly, in this pandemic that we're having, there certainly is not a high demand for additional commercial space. But I don't think that having a family out there with children playing that close to the highway is really good planning. Certainly the Planning Commission listened to the naysayers that came out and don't want any change, and they don't want anything, that is going to generate more traffic and difficulties. The board did suggest to the Planning Commission to consider the office transitional zone, but I didn't really hear many comments from the Planning Commission about that, and it was just kind of curtly denied. At this point, I would be willing to change my request from commercial to the office transitional zone. And in fact, I took my site plan of that and pulled out the zoning requirements for that particular district and did some initial sketching. And it looks like a small office building could fit on those two lots if combined. Not more than 5,000 square feet, which isn't going to be much of an office in any case. Also, with the restrictions that you have there, I might not get any more than 8 to 10 parking spaces. So that certainly is not going to generate a lot of traffic or conflict. I also know that there's no way in God's green earth that PennDOT is going to give me a curb cut off of Atherton that close to an intersection. But putting one building on the combined lots and keeping the driveway entrance back off of Atherton as much as possible, I don't see how that's going to cause any great consternation. And I think it's a better use of the property. And I think it's appropriate zoning and not just listening to the naysayers of the neighborhood.
Sorry, I forgot I had muted myself. Okay, any additional questions or comments from the board or from the public? I'm looking for a raised hand, or if you're in the public and wish to comment, please turn on your video so I can see you. All right, I don't see any questions or comments. So now the board has the following options at this point. And I'll just quickly review them for the viewing public. Number one, determine if any additional information is required prior to taking further action. Or number two, deny the request by direct action. Or number three, deny the request by taking no action. Or number four, move the request forward and direct staff to prepare a draft ordinance to rezone the public hearing and further consideration at a future meeting. So I'm waiting for a member of the Board of Supervisors to take some action here. Anita Tees, go ahead.
First, I'd like to say to Mr. Hawbaker, I commend the work that you have done through all these years for Park Forest Village. My husband and I moved here in 1976, and we moved here because of the trees and the ambiance. We live in Park Forest Village, and I commend the work that you have done there. I also commend what I think is your heart for the folks who seek housing here. As you may know, our housing task force includes a representative from Habitat for Humanity. And I've heard that you've been a supporter of theirs, just as an individual, not for business profit or anything. And I commend that. I sense too your desire to take the broader picture, and I hear your view that you think the land is best developed not for residential but for another purpose. I hold a different perspective, and I support the Planning Commission in their review of the request. I listened in on that discussion, and I support their unanimous recommendation that it stay as residential. I know that's very disappointing if our board denies your request, but I would move that we do take action, that we don't just have it be a non-action. And so I would move that the board take action to deny the request.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Elliot Abrams raises his hand. Elliot has seconded it. Now,
I'll second that one.
thank you. Discussion. Any more discussion? Betsy, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to voice my agreement with Supervisor Tees and Abrams, but I also am interested in the proposal to change from C1 to office transition zone. I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, but I think that deserves a look-see. I'm not even proposing a timeline, but I offer that as part of the discussion as a way for us to look at this at some point down the road.
Any other questions or comments or discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of denying the request, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Okay, everybody voted, so there were no nay votes. The motion to deny the request passes. Thank you. Let's move on to the next item, 6B.
Elliot's got a question.
Oh, Elliot? Sure, go ahead.
I agree with Betsy that it's worth looking at. And the alternate use, I agree with what we just did, but I don't think we should close our minds to the possibility that there is something better.
Okay, thank you, Elliot. All right, 6B, preliminary final land development plan for Penn Highland Micro Hospital and Medical Office Building. Go ahead, Doug.
Why don't you go ahead, Nicole?
Oh, Nicole, go ahead.
Hello. So Penn Highlands Healthcare is proposing to put a 3-story micro hospital and a 2-story medical office building to complete the build out at the Patton Town Center development that is at the kind of corner of Wattle Road and the Colonnade Boulevard. The Planning Commission reviewed this plan at their April 5th meeting, and the board saw this for the first time at their last meeting on April 14th. The Planning Commission does recommend approval with a handful of conditions that include that each comment on the staff letter is met, that there is a pedestrian connection to connect to the Kohl's site, and the completion of the traffic impact statement comments. And I do believe, as per the revised agenda that was given, that there has been agreement made to the comments from the TIS, and there is a kind of list of things that will be supplied to help coordinate the traffic signals on Colonnade Boulevard.
Thank you, Nicole.
Welcome.
Any more input from the developers? Mr. Khan, do you have anything you wish to add? You need to unmute yourself, please. You're muted.
Excuse me. Yeah, my name is Eric Cannon with Paul Baker Engineering. The only thing we would add is we are completing staff comments. We have those almost wrapped up, and we have reached out to the adjoining property owner, and they have acknowledged that they are reviewing our proposal to place that sidewalk connection onto the property, and that we have agreed, Penn Highlands has agreed to install those items at those other signals. And we will work with the township to get that done.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Any other comments or questions from, let's say, the public? Seeing none, let's go to the Board of Supervisors. Elliot, go ahead.
I would move approval, given the completion of the other technical items that have been listed.
Including the recently added one, right?
Yes.
Is there a second?
So move, Pam Rob.
Okay, moved and seconded. Further discussion. Anita, go ahead.
I just had a question at the last meeting. There was talk that you'd be contacting our fire director, Steve Bear, about his recommendation that the fire hydrant be moved to the 60 feet. And I wondered if that conversation had happened.
We have not done it yet, but what we did is prepare a plan today, and we did a comment response letter, and we just put that in the mail. So he'll be receiving that probably Friday or over the weekend, and we'll be reviewing that. I'll send off what we sent to staff this afternoon.
And I understand you'll be complying or talking with him about that request. So that if we approve the conditional approval today, it's our understanding that the fire hydrant will be on its merry way to be moved in your final plan.
That is correct. We did move it. He pointed out that if they had to connect to it, to a truck that's behind the building, you'd basically be blocking access. So we corrected that situation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, we have a motion. Let's move for a vote. All those in favor of approving, including the conditions, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Can. Moving on, item 6C, special event noise waiver and temporary use permit for the Ashcraft American Historic Racing Motorcycle Association. Doug, you want to start this?
Yeah, this is a repeat of event that they held last year. They went through the same process with the township to get temporary use permit and noise waiver. We checked and we did not have any complaints from last year regarding noise or the event itself. The police monitored the area and reported there were no traffic issues or anything like that. So they have again requested approval of those items for June 25th and to the 27th, yes. And they did supply, I missed it in the supplement, but they did provide the noise waiver. Last year, the waiver was approved effective from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Most of their activities related to the motorcycle racing will take place either, I think, late morning or mid-afternoon. So those are really outside the noise. Well, that's what the noise waiver would cover that. And with that, we do have, I think, Mrs. Ashcraft, Lisa Ashcraft, if you have any questions. Both emergency management and fire reported that they had no additional comments. Still didn't get anything back from State College Bureau of Health, but they worked closely with the Ashcrafts last year and reported again there were no issues.
Okay, I see we have the Ashcraft family here. Do you have any additional comments you wish to make?
No.
No, okay, let's see. Elliot, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. You're muted. Oh. There he is.
Move approval of the waiver.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
And the temporary use.
Yes.
And temporary use, second, Pam Robb.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. So let's have discussion. Any questions or concerns anybody wish to raise or questions to the Ashcraft family? Betsy, go ahead.
I have a concern that's tangential to the noise, but it is a health concern, and that is masking. We are still under guidance from the Centers for Disease Control for people who are unrelated and who have not had vaccine, and there's various stipulations that if they're in a crowded condition, they wear masks. And I want to know if that will be adhered to, and then to talk to the chief or the manager to find out how that would be supervised, if need be.
Betsy, I can answer that just from last year, and we'll use the same procedures this year. Everyone will be required to wear a mask. There's no real gathering. I mean, everybody kind of, we call it pits in their own area. So there's no real mingling. Last year we did do the award ceremony, like not as a group. So, because they do get little trophies. So, but yeah, no, we do adhere to all masking requirements. That's a national policy with the organization.
Thank you for speaking up so enthusiastically. So Good luck with your event. Thank you.
Yeah, we're a mask family, so.
Great.
Any other questions for the organizers? Or comments? No comments? Okay, let's move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Everybody agreed, so the motion carries. Good luck on your event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Number 7. 7A, COVID-19 local regulations update. That's yours, Doug, I think.
This is our last ordinance of the night. So again, we've been making changes as need be, as the Department of Health and federal government provides different guidance. In this draft, we're deferring a lot of the regulations to CDC guidance. As we see, it just changed yesterday with regard to outdoors and vaccinated people. So that's is referenced as part of that November 17th. People who are vaccinated and exempt, and all those conditions are included. We still, the one local limit that we do still have in this draft of the agenda is for on residential properties. There's a gathering limit for outside, not to exceed 100 people. And on township properties, an inside gathering limit of 50, an outside limit of 100 people. On business properties and Penn State and other things like that, they would be limited at this point by State Department of Health regulations, and they provide detailed limits for most business types. And then there is a default for outside groups. I can't remember. I think it's 67 people per 1,000 square feet, something along those lines. But there is guidance from the state on gathering limits on private property and business properties also. With that, I'd recommend, this puts us into conforming with what College Township has done. And I think the other municipalities are moving in towards changes like this. This ordinance would stay into effect until the end of July or until the state lifts their statewide declaration. With that, I'd ask the board to consider action to adopt ordinance 2021-617.
Okay, is there a motion? Elliot, you had your hand raised first, so, and Betsy had her hand raised, so I assume you're seconding, Betsy?
Sure.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2021-617 to supersede ordinance 2021-613. Discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, let's move for a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. So the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on, consent agenda. Does any member of the board wish to pull an item out of this consent agenda for separate discussion? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move Pam Rob.
Is there a second? Anita Tees, yes?
Yes.
Okay, moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Everyone voted yes. Motion passes. Next item, manager's report.
As a follow-up to tonight, there's lots of documents that need to be signed. So myself, Luana Moore will be reaching out to each of you. Each of the agendas needs a signature from everybody. So we'll be coordinating that over the next couple of days. Thank you. Manager's report, under correspondence, we did not receive a grant from the Center County on liquid fuels. We applied for some variable message board signs. We'll have to reapply again next year. We have moved into West Nile virus season. Center County conducts a program that's funded by the state. They will do monitoring, trapping mosquitoes, sending them to Harrisburg for being tested for West Nile virus. They will also collect dead birds. I'm not sure the exact details. Some years they will collect any bird. Some years they limit it to certain species. But the other thing that the county will do is we have very thick swarms of mosquitoes in some areas. They will actually come out and spray for that. So residents can either contact the county office, run out of the Planning Community Development Office, or they can contact me here at the township and I'll pass on the information. But they do provide that. Again, as they do every year, they ask everyone to make sure that there's no standing stagnant water on your property, because that's where mosquitoes breed. And if we can keep those, limit those areas, we limit the number of mosquitoes in the area. Next couple of items were correspondence from the Pennsylvania DEP, addressed to the board, had to do with annual reports that UAJA files, and those have all been found to be compliant. We had some supplemental information that was provided under item 9A2. Again, May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Dr. Krishna Kuti had provided some information on a program that will be available, I believe, through Penn State called Small Island Big Song. So there's information in there, and I believe we have a link to that on our website also. Also, we got a strongly worded response to our resolution on the use of local radar resolution. It comes from the organization National Motorist Association, which yearly contests any efforts by Pennsylvania to pass a use of radar or local use of radar law. Under 9B, I provided a link. There is a community event called Bells Across PA that will take place on May 2nd. Exact time evades me at the moment, but it's an opportunity to recognize first responders and others who have enabled Pennsylvania to prevail against the pandemic. As you probably saw, I think last week, there was a notice came out from the governor's office that a $2.44 million grant had been provided through the Commonwealth Financing Authority to the Tofttrees developer to extend Wattle Road up into Tofttrees West. I don't have any more information on that for you at this point, but also late last week, and I missed the actual announcement, but 2 or 3 people told me we had been awarded a $1.5 million grant for Atherton for improvements related to the Patton Crossing entrance that would upgrade signal and Atherton Street in the area of Woody Crest. So we'll be working on that agreement here shortly. Upcoming events, office is closed on May 31st for Memorial Day. July 5th is the observed day for fireworks on for the 4th of July. Again, there's household hazardous waste collection is coming here this weekend. I believe you can still pre-register if you need be. And May 18th is municipal primary election. Even if you're not registered with a party, there are 4 ballot questions on, there are 4 questions, constitutional questions on the ballot that everyone has the opportunity to vote on. So encourage everyone to participate this year in the primary election. That's the end of my report.
Okay, Anita, you have the
quick
floor.
questions that I've received from citizens. Do you know, Doug, when they'll begin work on the traffic light reconfiguration there by Patton Crossing?
Maybe in August or September. It won't happen any sooner than that.
And secondly, people have asked about the other frontage there that'll be right across from Aldi's, right along the North Atherton. We haven't received any development proposal for what might be going in there.
No, we have not. So we will have to wait.
We'll wait with bated breath. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Doug? Yes, Elliot.
Just my annual question of, does everyone know what a mosquito is? It's the only insect that makes flies seem somewhat acceptable.
All right. Okay, moving on. Committee reports. You have some committee reports submitted. I didn't submit one for the exec committee. All of you attended the general forum meeting, so basically everything that you heard from was what we discussed. There were two things that weren't really discussed at general forum, and one was, let me explain about the appointment of the COG solicitor discussion. The solicitor for COG has never been reviewed. There has been sort of a legacy firm that had been the solicitor for COG, and it's held by two people. Or first person originally, I think, aged out of wanting to continue, and so a second person from that firm has maintained that position. So the exec director of COG raised the concern, well, the issue to the exec committee, whether we wish to maintain everything as is or to look for a more formalized review and requesting proposals on a regular basis. So we will be discussing that in future meetings. And the other thing that wasn't really raised at the general forum meeting was communications procedure to outside entities. This was triggered by one of the COG committees, and I don't remember which one, actually sending out a public letter or comment without going through the general forum. And so that necessitates some kind of a more formal procedure and process to consider any kinds of communications that leave the COG, whether it's initiated by a subcommittee or general forum or otherwise. So that's another item we'll be discussing. Pam, Rob, you have your hand raised?
To
go
follow
ahead.
up on that, Dan, that came out of the Public Safety Committee. Paul Tackett brought it up. So our colleague from the Public Safety Committee brought that issue up, and that's why you're looking into it.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members wish to supplement your report or ask questions or comment? Yes,
And-
Betsy, go ahead.
Okay. I would just like to remind the public that the climate survey is still open for comment. The deadline is April 30th. The website to access that survey is centersustains.com. And that's centersustains.com. All of the data that is contributed through that survey will be taken into account as we go forward with our plan to reduce our carbon footprint here in the Central Region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betsy. Pam, go ahead.
For the CCMPO meeting, we just met last night, so I will have your report at our next board meeting.
Fine, thank you. Any other comments or questions or additions? I don't see any. Let's move on to, you see all the future meeting dates there to mark your calendars in advance. Housing Task Force report was included, and Water Authority report was included. Center County Cable Consortium did not meet. Spring Creek Watershed Commission, I don't think they met. They're meeting now. It's either every 2 months or every 3 months. I don't remember. So there's nothing else. So moving on to other business, does any board member have any other business to present? Betsy, you want to take up your items to be scheduled as prioritized, the sustainability resolution? You wish to change the priority of that one? Unmute yourself, please, Betsy.
Haven't done that in a while, gotta say. Yes, I would like that to be considered. If we could move that up as soon as possible. I am working with, or I've been approached by the Sierra Club. They have a program called Ready for 100. The State College Borough has cooperated or cooperated with that program. So I would like to see Patton consider that. I would like to see Patton have its own resolution to support our movement toward a carbon neutral output by 2050, similar to what other municipalities have done, just again, showing our solidarity.
Is there any discussion on that request? So if not, no objection, we'll ask our manager to reorder the priorities and put that sustainability resolution item at the top of the list. Any other?
You have documents you can share with me, Betsy?
Yes, I do. I've got sample ordinances that I'll share with you. Yep.
Anything else? Anyone wish to contribute for the good of the order? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Elliot moved, and I hear a second also. Any, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All voted, so we thank you very much. The meeting is now adjourned.